Good day and thank you for joining us on BeeTv News at 12. I am Lee Bratesman Johanna. Now the news in details. Peru is preparing to declare a state of emergency after widespread protests against newly inaugurated President Jose Jerry left one person dead and injured dozens of police officers, the report.
Peru is on the verge of declaring a state of emergency in Lima after violent protests against newly installed President Jose Jerry resulted in the death of a 32-year-old man and injuries to dozens of police officers. Prime Minister Ernesto Alvarez announced late Thursday that the government would implement the emergency declaration within hours, alongside a package of security measures to address erupted as protesters chanted "Everyone must go," attempting to breach barricades while police responded with tear gas. Eduardo Mauricio Ruiz, 32, was killed during the protest. Authorities confirmed he was shot and an investigation has been launched. Interior Minister Vicente Tibucio, addressing Congress afterwards, said the government would pursue sweeping police reforms. He reported 89 officers and 22 civilians injured and 11 arrests made during the unrest. Jerry, 38, who assumed office after leading Congress, has pledged to prioritize security but is already facing scrutiny over past corruption allegations and a now-dropped sexual assault investigation, which he denies. Jerry's presidency, set to run until elections in July, may face similar turmoil to Bulate's, whose tenure saw mass protests, dozens of deaths, and poll-mating approval ratings. Congress, which Jerry once led, remains highly unpopular, with approval in the single digits. Temitokpe Oluwafemi reporting for BeeTv News.
China's sanction on U.S.-linked units of South Korean shipbuilder Hanwha Ocean could jeopardize plans for deeper shipbuilding cooperation between Seoul and Washington by disrupting the supply of Chinese-made equipment and materials, South Korean officials warned on Friday. The sanctions announced by Beijing on Tuesday come as China and the U.S. escalate their trade dispute by imposing new port fees on each other's vessels, just ahead of a planned summit between the two nations' leaders, the report.
South Korea has pledged $150 billion to support U.S. President Donald Trump's efforts to revitalize America's shipbuilding industry, aiming to help it compete with China. However, officials in Seoul say the decline of U.S. shipbuilding and its supporting industries makes domestic sourcing of materials and parts virtually impossible. This push now faces a setback after China imposed sanctions on U.S.-linked subsidiaries of South Korea shipbuilder Hanwha Ocean, potentially disrupting supply chains. The move comes amid escalating trade tensions between the U.S. and China, with both sides imposing new port fees and ahead of planned leaders' summit. South Korea lawmaker Yoo Young-won warned the sanctions could cost Philly Shipyard, acquired by Hanwha last year, of interfering with private business and undermining South Korean U.S. cooperation. A spokesperson called the move part of a long pattern of Chinese coercion against South Korea. Hanwha Ocean declined to comment on the project's losses. China's Commerce Ministry justified the sanctions on national security grounds, citing Hanwha's involvement in unspecified U.S. government investigations. South Korea's investment plan is the most tangible commitment supporting a broader trade agreement aimed at reducing U.S. tariffs on South Korea exports. Zainab Mohammed reporting for BeeTv News.
Japan's lower house scheduling committee has agreed to hold parliamentarian vote to choose the next prime minister on October 21. A senior committee member told the Reuters on Friday in an effort to secure a majority and broaden its coalition. The ruling LDP has reached out to the right-leaning opposition Japan Innovation Party, a move that could pave the way for Takashi to become Japan's first female prime minister. Japan's ruling and opposition parties have agreed to hold a parliamentarian vote on Tuesday to elect a new prime minister, Kyodo, news reported on Friday. Sanae Takachi, the newly elected leader of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, will need the support of at least 233 lawmakers in the 465 members lower house to become prime minister. The vote follows the resignation of former Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba on September 7 after the ruling coalition suffered heavy losses in the October 2024 lower house and July 2025 upper house election. Takachi, 64, a staunch conservative and close ally of the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, made history as the first woman to lead the LDP. However, her path to becoming Japan's first prime minister remains uncertain after the LDP's longtime ally, Komeito, withdrew from the coalition last week, leaving the party short of the majority. In response, the LDP has entered talks with the right-leaning Japan Innovation Party, JIP, to form a new coalition, but JIP leader Hirofumi Yoshimura said on Friday that his party would only consider joining if the LDP agrees to commit to parliamentary seat reductions by the end of the year. Meanwhile, the main opposition, Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, which holds 148 seats, is attempting to rally other opposition forces behind unified candidates to challenge Takachi. Currently, the LDP holds 196 seats, JIP 35, the Democratic Party of the People, DPP 27, and Komeito 24. Mongolian Prime Minister Gomboja Zandashata resigned after losing the support of the country's parliament, Chinese state media reported on Friday. He stepped down from the key position just 4 months after taking office. Following a parliamentary session on Friday, lawmakers voted to dismiss Zandashata, a former foreign minister and parliamentary speaker, according to the Chinese official Xinhua news agency, the report.
Mongolian Prime Minister Gomboja Zandashata has resigned after 4 months in office following a decisive vote of no confidence by the country's parliament. On Friday, Mongolia's 126-seat state Great Kura held the vote, with 111 members participating of the parliamentary statement. The motion to dismiss Zandashata was submitted on October 10 by more than 50 lawmakers who cited constitutional violations and governance concerns. The controversy centered around the Prime Minister's recent appointment of a new Justice and Home Affairs Minister, which MPs argued was made. Citizens included Zandashata's public comments on an ongoing investigation which were said to undermine judicial independence and the presumption of innocence, as well as charges to mineral export pricing policies that allegedly promoted unfair competition. Zandashata, a 55-year-old economist with Russia education and a former bank vice director, was overwhelmingly elected just 4 months ago. He succeeded Oyun Edni Luv Sanam Sarai, who was also forced to resign after weeks of protests sparked by revelations of lavish spending by his son, fueling widespread frustration with the country's political elites. Mongolia
is reimposing sanctions on Iran amid concerns over Iran's failure to meet its nuclear obligations. Foreign Minister Winston Peters said in a statement on Friday, the sanctions mandate by the United Nations responds to Iran's non-compliance with the internationally recognized 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and will take effect on October 18. New Zealand will impose United Nations mandated sanctions on Iran due to non-compliance with its nuclear obligations and unjustifiable levels of uranium enrichment, the country's foreign minister announced on Friday. New Zealand has consistently supported diplomatic efforts to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons from any source. We strongly urge Iran to re-engage in negotiations and fully cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency, said Winston Peters in a statement. The United States sanctions Iran Regulations 2025, effect October 18, are being reinstated. 7 Pakistani soldiers were killed in a suicide attack near the Afghan border on Friday. Pakistani security officers reported this incident comes amidst a fragile ceasefire between Islamabad and Kabul, which followed days of intense fighting between the former allies earlier this month. The two neighbors engaged in heavy ground clashes, with Pakistan also conducting airstrikes across the disputed border, resulting in dozens of deaths and hundreds of injuries. The 48-hour truce that passed the violence is set to expire at 1 o'clock on Friday. A suicide attack near Pakistan's border with Afghanistan has killed at least 7 Pakistani soldiers. Pakistani security officers told Reuters on Friday, just hours before ceasefire talks between Pakistani and Afghan delegations are set to begin in Doha to ease escalating tensions. On Thursday, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif stated that the ball was in Afghan Taliban's court for achieving a permanent ceasefire following a 48-hour truce called after deadly cross-border clashes. If within 48 hours they want to resolve the issues and address our genuine demands, then we are ready for them, Sharif told his cabinet, emphasizing the need to eliminate Taliban Pakistan (TTP) terrorists and prevent Afghan territory from being used to plan attacks against Pakistan. The comments came a day after the ceasefire was declared, which paused a week of violence along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border that left dozens of troops and civilians dead on both sides. The recent spike in violence was largely driven by increased TTP attacks targeting Pakistani forces, including bombing in northwestern Pakistan. Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi reported that security forces thwarted an attack in North Waziristan for killing 4 terrorists. China's Xinjiang Huawei Combat announces on Thursday that it will begin producing lithium sulfate in the first quarter of 2026 as its new $400 million plant in Zimbabwe, supporting the country's push for increased local processing. The recently completed facility, part of Huawei's wholly owned Prospect Lithium Zimbabwe Arcadia mine, has an annual production capacity exceeding 50,000 metric tons of lithium sulfate, according to an executive during a tour of the site. Huawei, a leading global supplier of the battery materials, has announced plans to produce lithium sulfate production in Zimbabwe by early 2026. This development marks a significant milestone in expanding lithium supply chains amidst growing global demands for electric vehicle batteries and energy storage solutions. The company's new facility in Zimbabwe is expected to leverage the country's rich lithium reserves, boosting local mining and processing capabilities while contributing to Zimbabwe's economic growth. Huawei's investments will enhance the supply of high-purity lithium sulfate, a critical component used in lithium-ion battery manufacturing. This strategy moves align with Huawei's commitment to sustainable and responsible sources of battery materials. By establishing production in Zimbabwe, Huawei aims to strengthen its position in the rapidly evolving global battery materials market and support the transition to clean energy technologies. Production is slated to begin in early 2026, positioning Huawei as a key player in Africa's growing lithium sector and reinforcing Zimbabwe's role in the global battery supply chain. Colonel Michael Randrianirina, Madagascar group leader, was sworn in as president on Friday amidst cheers, blaring trumpets and raised swords. This comes just days after he seized control of the island nation following youth-led protests that ousted its predecessors. Former leader Andry Rajoelina, who was impeached by lawmakers after fleeing abroad over the weekend, has condemned the takeover and refused to relinquish power while in exile. The report.
Colonel Michael Randrianirina was officially sworn in as president of Madagascar on Friday, following a military takeover earlier this week. The coup occurred after youth-led protests forced former president Andry Rajoelina to flee the country. Rajoelina, impeached by lawmakers after his departure, has condemned the military takeover and refused to step down, despite significant defections within the security forces. The coup, triggered by weeks of demonstrations led by Madagascar's young population, often referred to as Gen Z protesters has drawn condemnation from both the African Union and United States Secretary General Antonio Guterres. In a ceremony held at the High Constitutional Court, Randorina vowed to fully, completely and justly fulfill the high responsibilities of his new role. I swear that I will exercise the power entrusted to me and dedicate all my strength to defending and strengthening national unity and human rights, he declared. Randorina announced that the military has dissolved all state institutions except for the lower house of parliament, the National Assembly. He also revealed plans for a transitional government led by a military committee, which will govern for up to 2 years before.
The National Pension Commission, PENCOM, has assured that all federal government workers retiring between October and December this year will receive their pension benefits by December 15. The Director General of PENCOM, Ms. Omolola Oloworara, provided the assurance during the opening of 2-day sensitization workshop for employees and pension desk officers in contributory pension scheme in Lagos. She stated that the Commission is finalizing arrangements to settle all outstanding pension liabilities under the CPS before the end of the year. This payment process follows the approval of a 75.758 billion naira bond by President Bola Tinubu, aimed at clearing long-standing pensions arrears dating back nearly 2 decades.
This vision is to expand pensions. So as some of you will know, those of you who are very familiar with the scheme, that on the mandatory pension contribution side for formal workers, we're doing very well. I think we're about 90% or more. And we're trying to get all employers to comply and ensure that they contribute and they remit pension contributions as at when due for their workers. But most importantly, we have tens of millions of people in the informal sector, over 70 million as at my last check.
Moments inside the Senate chamber as lawmakers took turn to question Professor Joash Ojo Amupiton, the nominee for chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission. The screening session began with the nominee reading out his academic and professional profile, one that reflected decades of experience in law, academia, and public service. While senators commended his impressive portfolio, they did not spare him the tough questions ranging from election logistics, technology, security, and inclusivity.
To answer directly and positively whether you were in fact a part of the President's legal team as alleged or speculated about.
With your wealth of experience, can you share with us what accountability mechanisms
the members of political parties, the masses, as well as technocrats and elites?
The nomination of Professor George Amupiton, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, for appointment as chairman, Independent National Electoral Commission, is hereby approved.
Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for BeeTv News.
And now to business news. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has released a new projection excluding Nigeria from the list of Africa's fastest growing economies. The report identifies Benin Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Uganda as the continent's leading economies in terms of growth. Let's join BeeTv News' Temitope Oluwafemi for details from Business World.
These countries have experienced sustained expansion due to policy reforms, enhanced fiscal management, and increased investment in infrastructure and manufacturing. According to the IMF, Sub-Saharan Africa's overall economic growth is expected to stabilize at 4.1% in 2025, with further improvement anticipated in 2026. The IMF advised countries to prioritize domestic revenue mobilization through digital tax systems, elimination of inefficient tax expenditures, and enhanced compliance enforcement to improve economic resilience. The Dangote Petroleum Refinery has set a monthly distribution target of 600 million liters of petrol as part of measures to address domestic supply shortages and stabilize fuel price in Nigeria. The new distribution frame association of Nigeria.
And lastly, on entertainment news, Nollywood actress Uche Ogbodo has confirmed the successful completion of our recent cosmetic procedure, Lipo 360 surgery. This follows her previous Brazilian butt lift BBL surgery. Prior to the procedure, she shared a video from the hospital expressing confidence and optimism. Also, Paris Jackson received $65 million from Michael Jackson Estate. Let's join BeeTv News Evening Izibili for details and more from Entertainment World.
After the surgery, Uche expressed gratitude to her medical team and confirmed that the operation went smoothly. Her openness about undergoing multiple cosmetic surgeries has sparked discussions about beauty standard, self-love and personal choices within the Nigerian entertainment industry. Her husband, Bobby Maris, has also encouraged women who can afford such procedures to pursue them without shame. In another development, the Lagos State government has provided clarification